What is up, Star Wars fans? This is Darth Watson. In this video, we're going to be talking about George Lucas's recent interview and what George Lucas has said. He's said some things about how AI makes filmmaking a lot easier in the future. He's also made some comments about Hollywood and modern day filmmakers being too afraid to take risk. And he also gave some insight on Star Wars, but also is like a relate to filmmaking. And George Lucas has said quite a few things that relates to that. So let's start with like AI. So George Lucas has said that AI will make things easier as for filmmakers in the future. Like there's AI tools that's already being implemented in softwares like Adobe Premiere. There's DaVinci Resolve, there's Final Cut Pro, which are all really great softwares for editing. And with all of the AI tools, it's making editing easier and easier and easier because editing, I mean, even a few years ago with editing, it was a lot harder to do editing than it is now. Like each year, I can tell, like every time, because I use Adobe Premiere for my videos, and each time I see Adobe Premiere just getting easier and easier and easier to edit. And I've been noticing that over the past few years since I've had Adobe. So, George Lucas talks about how AI does help with like the editing process, but also like the writing process, like basically like how to turn an outline into a script and stuff like that. It makes things a little bit easier on filmmakers going forward. But at the same time, I wouldn't trust AI to do everything for you. I mean, AI is good for some things, like maybe like Grammarly, where you're typing out the essay yourself, but Grammarly helps you with like spell corrections and stuff. Like AI is good for that, or maybe you could do use AI for like research or stuff like that, to do like thorough researches and stuff like that. Like AI is good for some things, but it's not really good for everything. But the way George Lucas was talking about AI is how it will make film making easier. And he also has expressed that he would use AI if he were still making films. But we do know that George Lucas has a museum that's opening up on September 22nd. So George Lucas has also criticized like modern day filmmakers on how they're too afraid to take risk, and they're doing too much fan service. And he also says that as for filmmaking, like especially like within Star Wars, it shouldn't appeal to the fans. Fans are not the ones who get to decide whether or not uh, how a movie is made. Fans shouldn't have to be dictating. Fans should not be dictating how a film should be made, and creators should be more focused on telling the story rather than appealing to the fans. And that's what George Lucas has stated. So George Lucas has gone on and talked quite a bit about that, the filmmaking, and how it shouldn't appeal so much to the fans. It should be more what the director wants to do and how he wants to tell a story. And George Lucas himself has said that all he wants to do is tell a story of what happened here and it went to there. And he sold his sequel trilogy outlines, which Disney didn't entirely use, but they took some ideas out of his sequel trilogy outlines when making the sequel trilogy, like the older exiled Luke Skywalker haunted by the betrayal of one of his nephews. That was George Lucas' idea, which Ryan Johnson has taken up the most inspiration from George Lucas's sequel trilogy treatments. And George Lucas has even said that The Last Jedi was beautifully made. So George Lucas did like The Last Jedi. He hasn't really said too much about every Disney project, but George Lucas doesn't. The way I see George Lucas, because I see him on the set of The Mandalorian, I see him making comments on Disney projects, and he did enjoy the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, so it doesn't seem like George Lucas completely despised Disney Star Wars like, some people like the Gatekeepers Alliance, like, those type of people where they just go on saying, "Oh, if you like Disney Star Wars, you're against George Lucas Star Wars." But these people in the Gatekeepers Alliance just don't know how to shut up sometimes. And I mean it, like I've had it into like OG Star Wars and the Gatekeepers Alliance, and these people are just frauds, and they think, oh, George Lucas viewed the EU as canon, and the EU was canon to George Lucas, when George Lucas has made it very clear that it's not. I mean, look at the interview that was back in 2008. George Lucas says that once Vader dies, he doesn't come back to life. Okay. And Luke Skywalker doesn't get married, and the Emperor does not get cloned. What happens in Star Wars Legends? We have the Emperor returning in Dark Empire. We have uh we have Luke Skywalker getting married. We have and Luke Skywalker being like the new Vader. Like we have those stories in Star Wars Legends which kind of go against George's wishes. Even though George Lucas has signed off, he has approved of it because technically like people say, well, George Lucas approved of the EU. George Lucas approved this, that. I'm like, yeah, he approved it. He signed off on it, but that doesn't mean that he considers it canon to his saga. That just means that it was merchandise to George Lucas. Like he signed off on it, and he said, "Yeah, you can write stories about Star Wars, but it's not a part of my vision. It's not a part of my story." Like George Lucas has said that. Like just because he signed off on it doesn't make it a part of his vision. It doesn't make it a part of his story. That was just merchandise, and the expanded universe brought in a lot of money to Lucasfilm. So, really, the expanded universe was keeping Lucasfilm alive, and that's why George Lucas said they can continue writing books until he says they can't. So, George Lucas doesn't view the EU as canon. Although not to say like there weren't some things that he liked about the EU. Like there were some things about the EU that he liked. Like he pulled the Dark Talon character idea out of the expanded universe and used her as one of the main villains of his version of the sequel trilogy that he sold to Disney, but it's not the same Dark Talon from Star Wars Legends. He just liked the character idea. So there were some things that George Lucas liked and disliked about the EU, but at the end of the day, George Lucas only viewed canon was the 6 films and the TCW series. But anyways, that's pretty much all I have to say for this video. Do make sure to smash a like, subscribe, comment, and I will catch you all later in another video.